There are a select few athletes that possess the talent and skills necessary to ascend to the upper echelons of their respective sports. This is of course true with mountaineering as well. However, the sport's top athletes must brave the frequent, omnipresent dangers encountered in the mountains to achieve greatness. As regular viewers of my content are no doubt aware, these potentially lethal hazards are present for even climbers whose skill is far greater than the ascent's difficulty, as even smaller, beginner-friendly mountains can be rife with danger. A prime example of this being Mount Rainier in the state of Washington, a mountain which is widely considered to be a great peak for beginner mountaineers to seek to summit. However, such mountaineers regularly lose their lives while on its slopes. Furthermore, not only beginner-level mountaineers have lost their lives on the slopes of Mount Rainier, as even top-level mountaineers have perished on its slopes, such as the high-altitude mountaineering pioneer and legend Willie Unzold, a name that should be familiar to many of my regular viewers, as he was often involved with the first ascents of many of the world's highest and most dangerous summits. As my regular viewers are also no doubt aware, to truly push the boundaries within the top levels of mountaineering, an ever-increasing acceptance of risk is required to attempt to summit the most dangerous peaks on the planet. And unfortunately, as I've detailed across many of my videos, few of mountaineering's elite have survived long enough to retire from the mountains, as the number of the sport's top talents that have had their lives abruptly cut short is rather incomparable to most sports, and the life expectancy of top mountaineers is frighteningly more akin to the life expectancy of top artists within the drill rap music scene instead. Hayden Kennedy was born in the year 1990 in the city of Carbondale, Colorado, and by his teenage years had become entrenched within the local rock climbing community. Throughout these years, Hayden would hone his climbing skills, and by his early adulthood had become a highly proficient climber and a recognized figure within the local community. As is common with many skilled rock climbers, Hayden would find himself naturally drawn to mountaineering and alpinism, and his high-level rock climbing skills helped propel him through the sport's ranks. And by 2012, at the age of just 22, Hayden possessed the skills and the will to attempt to ascend one of the world's most difficult and intimidating peaks, the 10,262-foot Cerro Torre, located in the Argentinian Andes, a fearsome spire of rock and ice, which is capped by an ever-changing and ever-difficult-to-navigate rime ice mushroom caked upon its uppermost slopes. However, Hayden would not simply be attempting to just ascend Cerro Torre. He would in fact attempt this ascent with further ambitions as well. Hayden and his climbing partner for this ascent, a climber named Jason Kruk, would follow the infamous compressor route up Cerro Torre, named for the air compressor that hangs precariously from Cerro Torre's sheer slopes, that was originally used by Italian climber Cesare Maestri to fix over 100 bolts along the route during his efforts to be the first to summit Cerro Torre successfully. Cesare would declare his efforts complete upon reaching the base of the rime ice mushroom, and the over 100 bolts, as well as the compressor, were left in place along the route, which would upset many subsequent purist climbers seeking to ascend the route themselves without the bolts. Two such of these climbers were in fact Hayden and Jason, and as they made their ascent of the peak, the duo would chop and remove many of the bolts and ladders left behind by Maestri, ultimately chopping and removing over 125 bolts and several ladders during their ascent, which they claimed as the first fair means ascent of the compressor route. However, their decision to do so would prove to be a controversial one, as upon completing their climb, the duo were succinctly arrested by local authorities for destroying what many perceived as artifacts of local historical significance. Following his release from jail that same year, spurred on by his successful endeavors on Cerro Torre, the following year in 2013, Hayden would travel to the Karakoram Range in Pakistan to attempt an ambitious ascent of one of the world's most dangerous and difficult to ascend peaks, the infamous Bantha Brock, otherwise known as the Ogre. On this 2013 ascent of Bantha Brock's unclimbed southern face, Hayden would be joined by two elite alpinists, a climber named Josh Wharton and a climber named Kyle Dempster, the latter of which might be a name my longtime viewers may remember from my previous video about Bantha Brock, as he had completed the third successful ascent of the peak the previous year in 2012, and would later disappear while attempting an ascent of Ogre 2 in 2016, which I detailed in the aforementioned video. The trio's combined skills, ambition, and tremendous efforts in 2013 to make the first successful ascent of Bantha Brock's southern face would ultimately result in triumph, and all three of the men were awarded one of the most prestigious awards within alpinism and mountaineering, the Piolette d'Or Award, for completing this ambitious ascent. Hayden, however, would not rest on his laurels for long, as 2 years later, in 2015, he would team up with three-time Piolette d'Or Award-winning climber Marco Prezelj to attempt a very ambitious ascent of the Light Before Wisdom route on the infamously only once previously summited 6,173 meter Himalayan peak Sero Kishwar in India. Hayden and Marco were joined on this ascent attempt by climbers Manu Pelissier and Urban Novak as well. The four climbers would endure several days of brutal climbing conditions, spending their nights bivvying on small ledges along their route towards the summit. Their hard work would be rewarded, however, as the team would ultimately reach the summit in triumph, and after they spent one final night bivvying atop the peak's narrow summit, the quartet would descend successfully to complete their climb. This impressive ascent would earn Hayden his second Piolette d'Or award, further cementing his legacy as one of the top talents within the sport. Following his triumph in 2015, Hayden was largely accepted as one of the world's best climbers, and at a party later that year, in 2015, Hayden would meet a 21-year-old woman named Inge Perkins, a rising star within the sport climbing community, after red pointing, which means attempting to free climb a route with no experience on it beforehand, several 514 rated routes. Hayden and Inga would hit it off at the party, with some of Hayden's friends recounting that he was immediately smitten with her, and not long after the party, Hayden and Inga would become a couple, and they would settle in together in Inga's hometown, Bozeman, Montana. Over the following 2 years, the couple would enjoy each other's company as they made excursions to the plethora of rock climbing and skiing spots near their Bozeman home. However, in early October of 2017, the couple would make one such excursion to the nearby 11,207-foot Imp Peak, located in the Madison Range, for a skiing outing that would alter the trajectory of their lives forever. On October 7th, 2017, the couple made their way from their Bozeman home to Imp Peak to partake in some early season skiing, as the region had been blanketed by snowfall earlier than usual that year, with an approximate 3 to 4 foot layer of snow hitting the peak in late September, further layered by another foot of snowfall on October 1st. The couple planned to not only make a ski descent of the peak, but also planned to skin their way up the peak, which skinning is the process of ascending a slope while wearing skis, reverse downhill skiing essentially. The couple made good progress skinning their way up the peak slopes and had reached the base of Imp Peak's northern col at an approximate elevation of 10,000 feet, when suddenly the snow around them would begin to violently shift and churn, and the two quickly realized that they were being swept up by the unwavering force of a powerful 150-foot wide avalanche. The sweeping avalanche cascaded down the peak slopes for approximately 300 feet before coming to rest. Hayden was partially buried in the slide. However, he was able to free himself from the debris and began to frantically search for Inga. Unfortunately, however, he was unable to locate Inga, and despite having packed an avalanche locator beacon in her pack for the trip, she had not actually turned it on, rendering the device useless for locating her. After scouring the debris field for over an hour, Hayden was still unable to locate any trace of Inga, and by this point, the devastated veteran outdoorsman knew that since Inga had been fully buried by the slide, there was almost no chance that she was still alive at this point, as even if she had managed to clear a breathing space around her face before the shifting snow had come to rest, she would have almost certainly run out of breathable air and asphyxiated. Entirely devastated by the whole ordeal, Hayden would retreat back to their vehicle and would leave a note for rescue officials that detailed the incident and the location of the slide and where he thought Inga's body likely was. However, he would not make any calls to emergency officials to inform them of what had occurred before he made his way back to the couple's home in Bozeman. Unfortunately, clearly, the agonizing loss of his beloved Inga that day would prove to be a loss too great to bear for Hayden, who, tragically, would end his own life at their home the following day on October 8th, 2017. On October 10th, 2017, officials would announce that they had located Inga's body within the avalanche's debris field and noted that Hayden's note had been incredibly accurate as to where it stated that she was likely buried. That same day, Hayden's father would make a post on Facebook addressing his son's death that read, quote, "Hayden survived the avalanche, but not the unbearable loss of his partner in life. He chose to end his own life. Myself and his mother Julie sorrowfully respect his decision," the post read. Following their deaths, the climbing, alpinism, and mountaineering communities alike were devastated by the loss of Hayden and Inga, as both were very well liked and had many friends within these communities. A close friend of Hayden's would share one of his writings reflecting on the darker aspects of climbing and finding growth from the grief in the wake of the inevitable deaths of many of these friends in the weeks before his own death that read, quote, "Over the last few years, I've watched too many friends go to the mountains, only to never return. I've realized something painful. It's not just the memorable summits and crux moves that are fleeting. Friends and climbing partners are fleeting too. I don't want to be the guy who judges or resents my friends for their choices in the mountains, because I know how it feels to be judged for decisions I've made in the mountains. Climbing can be an incredible catalyst for our growth, but I am beginning to realize that there's a certain danger in making climbing the singular focus of your life, because it can actually limit the opportunity for growth and reflection if you don't stop, pause, breathe, and reflect. he wrote. Thank you all for watching.